Hi friends, in this video we are going to study the project phases and life cycle. We are going to discuss the project management process groups and the REBA work plan. Project life cycle. We have in the last video studied about PMI, its various knowledge areas and the main process groups. Now, how do these constitute into the main project life cycle? So the project life cycle is defined as the series of phases in a project that it passes through from its start to its completion. A project phase further can be defined as a collection of logically related project activities that culminates in the completion of one or more deliverables. So, a project phase can be said to be time bound. It will have itself a perfect start and an end date or various control points within it. Only after a phase gate or a control gate is crossed through various checks, etc., that the project enters into the next phase. At such check gates, the entire project charter, the business documents, the feasibility of the project, etc., is re examined as to the current environment. So these phases can be lined up sequentially. They are iterative or can be overlapping. Thus, like you see in the diagram, the complete cycle of these 5 phases initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and control, and closing form the project life cycle. These project phases are determined by the management, and the control is in the hands of the organization. At such times, the project's performance is compared to the project management plan to determine if the project should be changed, terminated, or continued as per the plan. Here, we can see a typical life cycle curve for a project in which the degree of changes or cost is mapped against the project time. One of the typical characteristics of the life cycle is the staffing levels. This is shown in the diagram with the orange curve. As you see, in the start, the workload is less and hence less number of staff is involved in the project. As and when we move from the initiation stage to the planning and next to the execution stage, the requirement of manpower significantly increases. While the project is at a peak, you can have huge number of engineers, supervisors, workers working simultaneously at the site. Once the peak is gone and the project nears completion, there is a rapid drop. There can be series of staff getting transferred from the project, etc., and only a handful of commercial planning and site staff will be retained. The next curve is the risk or uncertainty curve. At the beginning of the project, you can see the red line is at the peak. That is, the risk or the uncertainty involved in the project parameters is the highest. These factors tend to decrease gradually over the planning phase, and once the project comes into the building phase, then it is significantly falls down, and near the closure it is the minimum because then we are all aware of the project risk, what has happened, etc. The third curve is cost of changes, which is marked by a green line. It is exponentially rising from the start to end of the project. This is because the stakeholders have all the powers at the beginning to make changes to the project whatever they want, without there being any cost to it. As and when the project progresses into the planning stage and further into the execution stage, once the drawings etc. are freezed, if then the stakeholders, the client, wants to make some design changes, then the cost significantly rises because already the procurement plan is made, designs are freezed. If there are changes, the designers etc. will charge you for change of scope etc. And moreover, in the closing stage, if it is required to make any changes, the cost is significantly high, which will overall impact not only the cost but also the project timelines. And time is money. Hence, it is best suited that value engineering is carried out at the beginning of the project itself. Moving further to the details of project management process groups. There are 5 project management process groups, that is, initiating process group, planning process group, executing process group, monitoring and controlling process group, and the closing process group. So, the processes performed to define a new project, a new phase, or an existing project by obtaining the authorization to start the project is called the initiating process. This initiating process is majorly governed by the preparation of the project charter. Next is the planning process group. In this, the processes required to establish the scope of the project, define the objectives, define course of action required to attain the objectives that the project was undertaken to achieve. So this process group basically defines all the drawings, etc. that is required to give a direction to the project and help it attain the objectives in the next phase, that is the executing phase, wherein the processes performed to complete the work defined in the project management plan in order to satisfy the project requirements is given. The monitoring and controlling process group is one of the largest process groups which tracks and reviews as well as regulates the performance of each of the previous process groups. It will identify any area which requires changes in the plan and will then help initiate the corresponding change. The last is the closing process group, which is performed to formally complete or close any project, phase, or contract. Remember, process groups, as discussed, are not exactly the project phases, since if we divide the project into definite phases, as we said that a process will have a definite start and a definite finish. However, the process groups can interact with each other within a single phase. Hence, it is possible that there can be all process group represented within a single phase. However, each phase in a project is unique and distinct. This concept can be well explained through the project management process group interaction diagram. At the start of the project is shown where we enter into the initiation processes. Next, we move to the planning process, and then you can see there's the executing process. This shows that execution and planning goes hand in hand. If there are any issues, changes required at the time of executing, once again you may have to move into the planning process, that is, make required design corrections, etc., calculations required, and then once again you're involved into execution. Once the execution is completed, we move into the closing processes, that is, to close out any running projects and check if all the objectives are attained. The controlling, monitoring and controlling processes, as shown, covers the entire gamut of these four processes, right from initiating process to the closing process. It encapsulates the entire life cycle. This is because every process group requires to be monitored and there has to be controlling checks for them. Thus, after the closing process, there is an exit phase or the end of the project is marked. This interaction is further elaborated through the level of effort versus time curve in PMBOK. As you can see, the first process is initiating process group, which start from the initial time and will end after some time. The planning process can simultaneously start after initiating processes and continues to a major portion that is just before the executing process groups end. Next is the execution process group, which will start sometime later, the planning process group, and reaches to its peak. And it is the highest peak, as you can see, and will rapidly come down the level of efforts towards the closing group. For monitoring and control process groups, it starts right from the beginning and continues till the end. While the closing process group can start right in the middle where the project is in peak, because there can be certain areas of handover that the project can be divided into sub projects and there can be phase wise closeout. Hence, it will peak at a certain point of time and at the end of the project comes down. The largest level of effort, as shown, is clearly in the execution phase. After that, the next highest level of effort required in the planning process. The third is the monitoring and control process. The fourth being the closing process. And last is initiating process. Thus, these five process groups constantly interact with the 10 knowledge areas as discussed earlier to give 49 sub-processes which have their own inputs, required tools and techniques, and give certain outputs. Let us understand what are these 49 processes. The project management process group and knowledge area mapping chart shows each of the process mapped within the process groups with respect to the knowledge area they are related to. For example, the initiating process group has the 4.1 develop project charter process, which forms part of the project integration management, while identifying stakeholders in the initiating process group will be a part of the project stakeholder management knowledge area. Similarly, the planning process group has multiple processes which range across all 10 knowledge areas, while the executing process group has processes which are related to integration management, quality management, resource management, communication management, risk management, procurement, and stakeholder management. The monitoring and controlling process group, which also similar to the planning process group moves throughout the entire life cycle, usually relates with each and every knowledge area, while the closing process group has the closed project phase, which interacts with the project integration management knowledge area. The REBA design stages and plan of work has been further added into the project life cycle to give an exposure to various international standards of mapping work or life cycle. The REBA plan of work is published by the Royal Institute of British Architects, which is located in the United Kingdom. The first detailed plan of work was published in 1964. This plan of work splits the project into key project stages. Viva Plan of Work then provides a shared framework for design and construction that offers both a process map as well as a management tool. The plan of work has evolved through its history to reflect the increasing complexity of projects and to incorporate the regulatory changes in the country and across various areas in the world. This plan of work or design stages is briefly followed in all the Commonwealth areas and majorly by the architects because this more or less reflects the architectural design and development. As you can see, there are 0 to 7, that is 8 work stages. The zeroth stage is the strategic definition. First stage is preparation and brief. Second stage is concept and design. The third stage is spatial coordination. The fourth stage, technical design. Fifth stage is manufacturing and construction. Sixth stage is handover, while the seventh stage is use of the building. These can be further elaborated into the REBA Plan of Work 2020 matrix. As you can see, the strategic definition stage gives what the client requirements are, the business case, the budget, the project risk, etc. is all noted. Next, the planning and briefing stage starts, wherein the major initial project brief is signed off by the client. He states his quality and spatial requirements as well as undertakes feasibility studies, various project management plans, and project execution methodology is also devised. The concept design stage aims to prepare architectural conceptual designs as well as it outlines the cost plan and the project strategies. The spatial coordination involves proper energy analysis, architectural design studies, change control procedures, etc. While the fourth stage, the technical design stage, will involve detailed building system development, that is structural calculations, MEP designs, etc. So usually the stages 0 to 4, that is from strategic definition to technical design, will be taken one after the other, while the stages 4 and 5 will tend to overlap, that is technical design and manufacturing and construction, that is planning and execution, as we have seen in PMI, tends to overlap with each other. While the stage 5, manufacturing and construction, is taken up by the contractor at site till the site is given into client possession, that is handover stage. So the sixth stage, handover, usually involves the review of the project performance, commissioning, as well as post-occupancy evaluation of the building. Once the handing over stage is done, the stage 7, that is the use, starts and continues throughout the life of the building. The use phase is governed by facilities management, asset management, and verifying the project outcomes and the sustainability outcomes throughout its lifetime. Moving next to the Building Information Modeling Life Cycle, BIM is the trend in the market and the new form of project management. This further divides the project life cycle into detailed subphases. The first stage begins with programming. The next stage is developing a conceptual design. Third is detailed design phase. Fourth is analysis. Fifth is the documentation or preparation of all the shop drawings, detailed architectural and structural drawings. The next sixth stage is the fabrication phase, wherein these shop drawings are sent to the factories for preparation of pre-engineered buildings, etc. Next is construction on site, wherein 4D or 5D BIM technologies and softwares can be implemented to manage time as well as cost. Next is management of construction logistics that can also be managed through BIM softwares. After construction, the operation and maintenance stage, wherein all the facilities that is fixed in the building can also be directly monitored and controlled through building information modeling. After the lifetime of the project or the building ends, it goes into demolition stage, and this cycle continues through renovation further into programming, and the cycle of BIM continues. This is also an elaborate way of showing the project life cycle. This brings us to the end of this lecture, and to summarize it, we would like to once again define the project life cycle as a series of phases that a project passes through from its start to its completion. Thus, the project phase is a collection of logically related project activities that will culminate in the completion of one or more deliverable. We have studied in detail how the project management process group interact with the knowledge areas. There are 5 project management process groups like the initiating process group, planning process group, executing process group, monitoring and control process group, and the closing process group. We have also learned about the cost of changes, which increases with time, whereas risk and uncertainty in a project decreases along with time. We have also studied the 8 stages from 0 to 7 in the REBA Work Plan 2020 and the BIM project life cycle. Thank you.